2020 was business as usual for event planners. Then the global pandemic hit, and events were postponed or canceled while others were rebuilt as virtual experiences. How do you communicate change with vendors, attendees, and business partners? Is networking lost in a virtual event world, and how is technology reshaping the future of events? Welcome to the AdLibber podcast, featuring conversations of influence, some of it planned, much of it ad-libbed.
Welcome back to the AdLibber podcast. I'm your host, Jay Scott. Joining us today on the AdLibber is Macey Ley, an independent creative director, event strategist, and visual artist from Atlanta. Welcome to the AdLibber, Macey.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Today we want to talk about the event business. Obviously, a lot has changed this year due to COVID-19. Many businesses have been forced to evolve their tactics quickly, including many folks who were planning to have events here in 2020. A lot of things have gone virtual. So today we want to jump in and talk a little bit more about that. But before we do, Macey, can you give us a little idea what was the event business like at the beginning of the year or coming into the year and before COVID hit?
Oh, just before COVID hit, it was booming. I think the events industry was having one of its best years ever. And we were on track to handle a lot of events, exciting events and bigger events and more populous events in the spring. So the spring and fall tend to be heaviest seasons for events. And then like in February, late February and early March, like stopped almost dead in its tracks. Almost every person that I knew in events and the meetings industry had all of their clients cancel, like all of them within days. It was like the hospitality industry where people just canceled all of their bookings within 5 days. Everything was done.
Had you ever seen anything like that before in your career? I know you've been around, you worked in the Harrisburg market before. I know we said you're down in Atlanta now, but being around this type of industry and this business, has this ever occurred in your professional career?
Now I think everyone would agree in my lifetime, I've never seen anything like this. The closest was the huge recession when it hit all the marketing budgets and ad agencies and marketing agencies and PR agencies. They came to almost a grinding halt, but nothing like this. It impacted us for the entire year. Very few events are either have been saved or very few new events for 2020. And certainly people are gun shy for 2021 already.
Yeah. And can you talk about that? You're in Atlanta. A lot of events have moved to a virtual format if they're occurring at all. What are the type of projects that you typically go after as an event producer? Like, what are some industries you work heavily in?
So for me, it's primarily corporate conferences and occasionally some more social events, but corporate conferences are my sweet spot. So I think that, pairs nicely with my background in branding and marketing, understanding, what companies need and what their business goals and tying their event goals to their business goals. So, I think those might be a little bit easier to be able to push to a virtual event or a virtual world, but still it's this collectiveness. It's having everyone in the same room and feeling connected by just the sheer energy around you, I think has been challenging for everybody. And certainly for Atlanta, losing all of the event business. And we have a huge event culture in Atlanta. Not just, corporate events or users conferences, but a lot of music and media venues, buying events come to Atlanta and sports events. And so it not only crippled the events industry, but all of the subsequent businesses that get overflow traffic from them, like the restaurants downtown or midtown, places like that. It's pretty sad to see.
Right. I mean, obviously it's a big shock to the system, not just there, but everywhere across the country and globally. You're thinking about, the type of meetings and events that everybody maybe travels to once a year. There's a lot of associations that have their annual meetings. They didn't have them this year, or they moved to a virtual format. What does that do to, in terms of vendors and how they adapt? People who provide services to support a venue, or how do they do that? And what are some examples of ways in which you've seen vendors shift this year?
So if you're talking about vendors who usually facilitate an event, a lot of them are trying to gather up as much of the market as they can in the virtual world. So you'll see a lot of the online virtual platforms are either made by or modified by broadcast companies who've decided that they needed to shift and acquire and or build virtual platforms, or they're event app designers who have created this app for events that people adapt and take with them in-person events. But now that they have this technology and they were much more nimble and quicker to be able to put on event platforms, virtual event platforms that were sort of plug and play. You didn't have to have someone do it for you. You could kind of go in there and change things up. They were very limited as far as the broadcast part was. You had to use third-party vendors, but certainly they were very much more interested in the networking component. And I think now when I was looking for a partner for a virtual event platform back in March and April, there weren't a whole lot. And now, I mean, everybody's on it. Everybody has one.
Talk to me about communicating change during this time. I mean, we're all plugged in, so your phones, your emails, everybody's able to, adjust quickly and respond to everyone. How has it been though, talking to like a client who had this event, they still want to move forward. You're working with vendors and trying to figure out technology and how all this might, suddenly come together. Like, how do you communicate that change to the client or to their participants in an event?
Well, I think everyone was and still is very anxious. As a business owner, hosting an event in 2020 is a risk. It's always a risk. Usually they're not as risky as what people are, like the perceived risk, I should say, is greater for events. When you're putting a large investment into, an 1,800 person conference, you're talking upwards of $1 million. That's a lot of money that you're putting into it. And so you want to make sure you can get money back. So when I have conversations with clients, I still tell them, yes, it's going to be a virtual event, but we really need to focus on event strategy first. And you can't just plug and play an in-person event and plug it into a virtual platform that doesn't work. You have to redesign and redevelop all of the content and the format and everything. You're basically making a new event. And there are a lot of event producers out there, event directors who specialize in event strategy. And I think want to make that difference. There are many roles in event production, but event strategy is something that you desperately need. And I work with, marketing directors or creative directors or CEOs of companies to help them figure out what the next best move is in putting on a virtual event. And then as far as, working with potential clients or shifting those ticket holders over to a virtual event, it's about clear and honest and transparent communication. They want to know that the event is not going away. If it is, do they get their money back and how much of it? Is there any risk involved in purchasing a ticket if you haven't purchased one already? What they're going to get and what to expect. And that's always been the case, but now it's more important than ever.
Yeah, and I'm sure the turnaround time, the expectations are quicker, right, for a virtual or a hybrid event. You're saying it's basically like building a new event. You can't just take one and turn it into the other and just expect everything to be fine. So the clients and the participants in an event, they're expecting quick decisions and you'll be able to figure it out, right? And they're also probably expecting that they're going to maybe catch a break somewhere. Like, is the virtual format cheaper? Does it cost the same? Do I get the same, I'm missing out on some functions that I would have gotten in person. Like, how do you explain that part?
Yeah, that was a really big question for a client that I did a 3-day live conference for back in June. It was a users conference and the audience were educators. So anywhere from like teachers to superintendents to people who run boards of education in the States. And for them, content has always been the most important thing. They get dubious. They're just like everybody else and they want a really good experience, but they also get dubious about too much show because they're using taxpayer dollars essentially to fund the tickets, right? And they want to be responsible with the money you and I pay in our taxes for public education. And so I think what virtual events has done is it has elevated content. Like, you have to have good content. You can't get away with a lot of fluff that masks mediocre content. So content really is king. It always has been, but it's really evident when it's not. And you can take some of I won't name the names of the conferences I've been to, but users conferences where they have, 150 different breakout sessions and just as many speakers. And you go in thinking you're going to get a specific level of education. And really what you get is a lot of fluff and a lot of entertainment, which can be fun. But we were able to, with this particular event in June, keep the ticket price exactly the same, but offer additional content, like bonus content. We left the content up for 30 days. So teachers, instead of, being able to maybe get a maximum of 15 participation hours, they could cumulatively access 36 participation hours over a month's time and pretty much do it at their own pace and not miss any of it. A lot of the feedback we had received over the many years that I've done the event in person is that, gosh, I wish I would have been able to go to more sessions.
Yeah, and in a virtual format like that, and you can certainly do more, right? I mean, there's a lot more bonus content that maybe you couldn't do at an in-person event or that people weren't as aware of. I mean, do you think the awareness is there? Like, I can jump around and look for that a little easier in a virtual format and get what I need, and also I can maybe go back to it, right? If it was recorded webinar event, we've all been going to those throughout the course of the year. That's going to supplement what I would have done on site and maybe better for me in the end. I learned more. Do you think that's true?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's 100% true. How many of us have ever gone to a conference where we went to a session that we had pre-registered for so that they knew the head count, and we get there and it's not what we expected, but you can't really sneak out without being noticed. But in a virtual conference, you can do that and you're not losing a bunch of time and you're not creating a distraction for other people. And then to your point about if it's recorded and available, you can go back to it as often as you want within whatever period of time you've paid for.
I feel like you can retain a lot more of it in the virtual environment because a lot of in-person events, for businesses or different, corporate functions, you may be going there for the networking aspect and you're not as engaged to the presenters and what they're putting on the screen, even if it's very valuable and it just comes across as a different experience. You think that that's been lost at all, like as far as the networking aspects and all this?
I would say it depends on what kind of person you are. So one of the most surprising pieces of feedback that I gleaned from the virtual events that I've done are overwhelmingly the people say they can concentrate so much better. They have an actually better learning experience. And for a lot of people who don't like to travel or who don't like large groups that know that they have to go to these conferences because there's learning there or they have to network to be able to expand their business or whatever it is, but it really makes them feel uncomfortable. It gives them a safer place in which to do it. And what I thought was really interesting is that, the sales team and all of the vendors that we had at this particular event were really nervous about not getting FaceTime with people, like actual FaceTime, because I think in sales, everyone would agree that FaceTime seemed much more important and much more valuable than electronic messaging or phone calls or whatever. But what they found was that they had more qualified leads by the time they got the leads because people had time to really think about who they wanted to talk to, who they wanted to see. They could have a quick little chat, virtual chat with a sales rep or somebody manning a booth and get the information they needed, sit on the information, think about it, and come back and say, okay, I'm ready. And that required very little effort from the sales teams that were running those booths.
Yeah, as I say, why are we more willing to give up our information for these online events? It does seem like everybody's asking for the same amount of information that you would get in person. You're just, you're more willing to do it. I don't know why. Is it the ease of access, the fact that you're not traveling and really dedicating a lot of other time? You're going to give over that info that somebody can then use to like remarket something to you later.
Well, so there's different degrees of information that you give over when you go to an event. And a lot of it you have to opt in for, or a lot of it you can change in your profile. But the one thing that I was referring to is those event sites that you can, as an attendee, go to the virtual expo or whatever it is, and you get to choose who you talk to. So you're not walking down the aisle with everybody like asking for your attention or trying to give you some swag or spraying something on you before you even want to try it, right? You're not being accosted. It's like a dating app almost. Like you're getting to choose who you want to talk to based on their profile, and you have the safety of your house and the protection of a screen so that the vendor isn't the one doing the introductions first. And I think for a lot of people, that makes browsing. It's like window shopping. You can browse before you buy. So I think, again, just being upfront, transparent about the information you're collecting and how you want to share it and what the benefit is to the attendee to share a certain kind of information.
I think it's amazing the level of, technology that exists. And a lot of this, to be clear, a lot of these things were happening before COVID, right? I mean, we're talking a lot about virtual events, and we're talking a lot about the way it's impacted us this year during COVID. But you were working on these kind of things before, right? I mean, in terms of
Yes.
people who wanted to go about a hybrid event model, they wanted to add some other layer to their in-person event that wasn't there before. This just accelerated it, right? The coronavirus.
I would agree. It accelerated it. It was on track, but it was slow moving because one of the reasons why I couldn't find an event platform that fit the event to a T was because a lot of the features that we were asking for from a virtual event platform, nobody wanted before 2020. They were telling vendors, no, we want to do that in person. So we don't need you to take care of that in a virtual world. We don't want that. But now those options aren't available right now because large gatherings just aren't as safe as they used to be, at least not yet. Now, virtual event platform technology providers are scrambling to address those needs, and they're just going to get better. I tell people, if it doesn't exist now, just wait 3 weeks. Someone's going to come up with it, and it's going to be great.
Well, what impact does it have then on venues, or how do we go back to what we were doing before? Or is this the new normal in terms of the event business? Is 2020 shown us the better path forward, and we should expect to see this virtual format exist indefinitely?
That's a really hard question to answer. It's loaded.
Yeah.
It requires me to predict the future. All I can say is that we are on a trajectory to make virtual events more commonplace. 2020 did it for us. And we weren't quite ready, or as ready as we would have liked to. So now we're sort of clamoring to keep up. But this stated ambiguity that we are all in is really an opportunity for innovation. It's a scary time. It's an uncomfortable time, but in ambiguity, there's always opportunity. And I'm really excited to see what these creative minds are going to come up with. I mean, I'm a creative person. You're a creative person. You work with creative people, but we're all different and we have different interests and different focus. And I'm really glad that there are people out there who are building platforms and technologies to address the needs of my clients, which might be different than my colleagues' clients.
What would you say, just to kind of close on, you were talking a lot about where we're at and this new normal, if you will, at least for the foreseeable future. What's something you're looking at as we begin to really think about 2021? What's a trend on your mind, or something you expect we will probably see going into the new year?
So thought really hard about, I've been thinking about that for a while. What are we going to see? And, I think one of the things that's really exciting is that AI technology is improving and getting better, and it's only going to improve the experiences, particularly the networking aspect, I imagine. And then I think the shift from traditional event formats, whether it's an in-person event or a hybrid event or a virtual event, I think those are changing to be more episodic and serialized. So instead of asking for someone's attention for 2 or 3 days back to back, there is a trend for events to be given over time. So it's, kind of like a podcast or a video cast. It's like, stay tuned, next week is part 2 of the event. And it allows people to digest information and get excited about coming back. It's also developing a kind of a fan base for an event. It's a serial event. And then I think the third one is really growth in diversity and representation. So now that you don't necessarily have to be limited by a geography, even though you can fly in, that's not always practical for your budget as an event planner or a business owner. It might not be practical as an attendee to fly in. And so you can open up your events globally with minimal cost to a traveler, which also gives you access to reduced speaker rates because you're not paying for their travel and lodging costs. And also, it gives small companies accelerated opportunities for growth. It gives them a piece of the market share that's more accessible to them that wasn't there. So they can have their own smaller events, but they don't have to pay for a venue or food and beverage or AV in the traditional sense. If they wanted to DIY it, they can.
No, I think you've given us a lot of really good insights. There's certainly a lot of pluses to the situation that we've all found ourselves in, or we thought we were heading in this direction maybe for the last few years. Now we're really living it, and certainly there's always going to be a few bumps in the road. But to your point about innovation, I think 3 weeks from now, things might look a lot different. There might be another platform There might be another vendor that you can leverage their resources, and maybe it'll help you as an event strategist or others within the industry, right? Do something a little bit differently for 2021.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, events are amazing. Getting in contact and being in the same space with a lot of people that you may or may not know is energizing, at least for me. Not for everybody, but for me, it's energizing, and I miss that. But I'm also really excited about like the potential for what the future holds for events, and how that's going to shift, and how accessible events are going to become to a lot of people. And the small businesses especially, they're giving workshops where they didn't realize that they had a market share to be able to do that. So I think we're going to see a lot of really exciting things happening.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, as somebody who participates in a lot of events, I can't wait. So we definitely appreciate you coming on and doing this virtually. We would have loved to have you in studio, just like a lot of the events that we were used to doing early in the year. But virtually is the way of the world right now, and we want to thank you for jumping on the AdLibber.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the AdLibber podcast. To find new episodes and get more content from our team here at Gavin, make sure to visit our website at adlibberpodcast.com. The AdLibber is also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.